It's strange to think that a quiet life can hold so many secrets, but mine does. Right now, I'm sitting in our small sunlit kitchen, the morning light filtering through the curtains, and my wedding ring feels heavier on my finger than it did yesterday. I'm Janet Archer, 28 years old, a marketing analyst who's just married the love of her life, Daniel. On paper, I have an ordinary life, a steady job, a modest apartment, and a family that leans on me in ways nobody quite acknowledges. I'm the one who pays the bills nobody else wants to handle, the one who steps in when emergencies pop up, and the silent supporter during family crises. Last Christmas, Rochelle, my stepmother, insisted on a lavish holiday party, complete with catered food and decorations that cost more than I was comfortable spending. When the time came to split the bills, she refused to contribute a cent. So I quietly covered everything: food, presents, even the tip for the caterers. Everyone enjoyed themselves, but no one thanked me. Not Rochelle, not even my half-siblings. That invisible labor is my norm. Rochelle keeps this cool, distant wall between us, a fortress of cold indifference that I've learned to navigate. She favors her biological children, Lisa and Mark, like they're precious trophies, while I remain the outsider, the stepchild who's expected to keep quiet and keep working, never quite belonging. I sense the tension whenever she looks my way, eyes sharp, lips tight, but I brush it off. Family, after all, should be about harmony, right? I keep telling myself that peace is worth more than confrontation. There's one secret that gives me a strange kind of quiet confidence, though. The family home, the one we all live in, is legally in my name. Daniel and I are the only ones who know this. It's a safety net, a quiet assurance that I have power if I ever need it. So far, I haven't needed to use it. I tuck the thought away as I glance at my wedding invitation, the one that says we're leaving for our honeymoon in just a few days. I'm excited, hopeful even, unaware of the shadows creeping closer. The memory of that first dinner with Rochelle when I was 12 still burns sharp and clear. I remember the way the air thickened when she praised Lisa for making the honor roll that semester. "Lisa, darling, you're our little star," Rochelle said, her voice dripping with pride. Then she turned to me, her gaze cold and dismissive. "Janet, why can't you be more like your sister? You make so many mistakes." That night, I felt small, a shadow in my own family. When she muttered, "You're just not our blood," it was like a punch to the gut. Our biological mother had passed away years before, and Rochelle stepped in as a replacement, but she never fully accepted me. My father, always quiet and conflict avoidant, never stood up for me. His silence felt like permission for Rochelle to rule with an iron fist. I tried to understand it as tough love, convincing myself that if I worked hard enough, I'd earn their approval. But the memory that hurt most was the broken vase. Lisa knocked it over, but I took the blame and was punished harshly. She walked away free, while I was grounded for weeks. That injustice planted a seed of insecurity that's never quite gone, a desperate need to belong to a family that didn't seem to want me. Over the years, I've made sacrifices that no one noticed. For 5 years, I quietly transferred $800 every month into the household account, covering utilities, mortgage payments, anything that kept the house running. I often delayed my own savings because there was always some emergency or another: the car breaking down, Lisa needing money for the kids, Rochelle's last-minute demands. Twice I canceled vacations with Daniel to look after Lisa's children when Rochelle claimed she was too busy. I never mentioned it. It felt like my responsibility. Yet Rochelle acted as if these contributions were expected, nothing to be celebrated or even acknowledged. At a family barbecue last summer, I raised a glass to toast everyone's health, hoping to share a moment of unity. Rochelle ignored me entirely, her attention fixed on Lisa and Mark, crowing about their latest achievements. Daniel later asked me why I put up with it all, why I chose to stay in a family where I was invisible. I told him hope still flickers inside me, that maybe if I keep trying, love will come. The house, the one legally mine, remains a secret power Daniel and I share, a quiet assurance I hold close but have yet to wield. It feels like an insurance policy, waiting for the day I might need it. For now, we are Janet and Daniel, navigating the minefield that is my family, Rochelle, Lisa, and Mark, and trying to find our place. The first public crack in the facade came at Lisa's birthday party last weekend. The house buzzed with relatives and neighbors, laughter and chatter filling every corner. I was looking forward to celebrating, to being part of something joyful for once. Instead, Rochelle singled me out in front of everyone, her voice sharp and accusatory. "Selfish," she spat. "That's what you are, Janet? Planning a honeymoon instead of babysitting Lisa's kids?" The room grew silent. Uncomfortable glances passed between guests. Some smirked, as if enjoying the spectacle. My heart pounded, a fierce mix of shock and hurt crashing over me. I froze, the words stinging deeper than I expected, but I managed to say, calm and clipped, "My husband is my family now." The words surprised even me. I slipped out of the room, my jaw tight, breathing hard to hold back the tears that threatened. In the kitchen, the silence pressed in around me. I debated walking away, cutting ties completely, but something held me back. Instead, I returned to the gathering quietly, claiming my place without apology. Rochelle's cold glare and sneer told me this resistance hadn't gone unnoticed. I told myself she must be under stress, that this outburst was just a moment. Yet, deep down, a seed of doubt took hold. Could this family ever be mine? Almost as soon as I pushed back, the backlash hit like a cold wave. Rochelle wasted no time turning the family tides against me. I started hearing murmurs, innocent at first, then more pointed, whispers that I was too selfish, that I didn't respect the family. It was a poison spread behind my back, and I caught the sting of it through the sideways glances and clipped greetings. Mark, Rochelle's son, didn't hide his disdain. I heard from a distant cousin that Mark was telling everyone I was turning my back on family, that I was an outsider deliberately choosing division over unity. It felt like a betrayal on top of a betrayal. The people I thought I could count on now silently, or not so silently, turning away. Lisa's stance was the hardest to bear. She was caught between her mother's manipulations and whatever flicker of loyalty she once had toward me. At family events, she kept her distance, her smiles forced and brief. Once, she avoided sitting next to me at the table, making some excuse about being tired. I swallowed the lump in my throat, fighting back the urge to ask why she was pulling away. But there was no room for that conversation, only a cold, growing gap. Rochelle had wrapped her influence tightly around the family's narrative, convincing relatives that I was the problem, that I was the troublemaker who needed to make things right. Their calls and messages started to sound like demands rather than concerns. The breaking point came at a family brunch. The air in the room was thick, heavy with unspoken accusations. Rochelle's voice cut through with a venom wrapped in faux concern. "Janet, you're always so sensitive. We're just trying to keep the family together." Her words were like ice water splashed on my skin, numbing and cruel. Everyone seemed to nod along, their expressions unreadable. I sat there, spoon halfway to my mouth, suddenly questioning whether I was really the one overreacting. Was I imagining the slights? Was I too sensitive? The doubt crept in, insidious and unwelcome. Daniel, sitting beside me, caught my eye. His worry mirrored my own confusion. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let the room's cold judgment swallow me whole. Yet the circle had tightened, and I was left more isolated than ever. The dynamic between us had shifted into a dangerous game. Every small stand I took met with a swift and punishing counterattack. Rochelle wielded her power with a ruthless efficiency that made resistance feel futile. It wasn't just about family warmth or discord now. It was about control and dominance. A battle over who would hold sway in this fractured household. I realized with a sinking dread that no small act of defiance would be spared retaliation. The fight was escalating, and I was already on the defensive. Determined to stop the spiral before it consumed me, I reached out for a meeting. Something private, something civil with Rochelle and Dad. I wanted to lay out the facts, to speak calmly about my contributions and the hurt of being sidelined. The day was gray and chilly, the clouds mirroring the weight I felt pressing down on me as I sat across from them at the kitchen table. Rochelle's eyes were sharp, but her smile was saccharine, as if she'd rehearsed the role of the wounded martyr. Dad looked tired, his eyes flicking between us, avoiding real engagement. I spoke quietly but firmly, trying to keep the frustration from my voice. I've been carrying a lot for this family, financially, emotionally. I don't ask for thanks. I just want to be seen, to be treated fairly. Rochelle's response was a performance of tears and trembling lips. "You don't understand," she said, voice breaking with false sobs. "We're the ones hurt by your coldness and ingratitude. You've been pushing us away." Her words were knives disguised as pleas. Then the threat came, veiled in that same crocodile sincerity. "If you keep causing drama, you won't be welcome at family events anymore." Dad nodded stiffly, his usual quiet deference to Rochelle clear. "You're making mountains out of molehills, Janet. Maybe if you stopped being so sensitive, things would be easier." The dismissal was a slap. I left that meeting drained, hollowed out by their refusal to hear me. As I closed the door behind me, the familiar ache of invisibility surged. I whispered to Daniel later, voice barely above a whisper, "They don't want to hear me." The hope for peace felt fragile, slipping through my fingers like sand. Yet, somewhere inside, the ember of stubborn hope refused to die. I promised myself I wouldn't give up. Not yet. The breaking point came with a brutal edge at the company holiday party. It was supposed to be a night of laughter and camaraderie, a chance for Daniel and me to share a happy moment with my world outside the family. Instead, Rochelle made sure the whole room saw the worst of her cruelty. Without warning, she cornered me near the buffet, her voice loud and dripping with sarcasm. "Janet, how's the family's ATM doing? Must be nice to always be the one paying the bills while pretending you're part of the family." She held up a half-empty glass, her eyes scanning the crowd. I felt the weight of everyone's gaze settle on me, my colleagues exchanging awkward looks, Daniel's brow furrowed with concern. She dragged out a minor family mishap, twisting it into proof of my incompetence. "Remember last weekend? The mess in the living room? Typical Janet, can't even keep the house in order." The humiliation wasn't just emotional, it was professional and deeply personal. I felt my heart seize, the hot sting of tears threatening to spill. Lisa hovered nearby, uncomfortable but silent, her eyes flicking away. Rochelle's parting jab echoed in my ears long after she left. "You're lucky we even let you call this family." The words were a cruel reminder that acceptance was never mine to claim. Daniel caught my hand, his grip firm and steady. "You deserve respect, Janet. Don't let them make you doubt yourself." His voice was a lifeline in that moment of despair, and I clung to it, even as Rochelle's coldness sank deeper into my skin. That night, I understood that her cruelty was no accident. It was deliberate, a calculated blow meant to wound and control. I wiped my cheeks in the restroom mirror, steadying myself. I wouldn't let her see me break. In the days after, desperate for a thread of reconciliation, I offered to help with Lisa's upcoming birthday party. It was a small olive branch, a way to show I still wanted family, despite everything. When I told Rochelle, I looked her straight in the eye and said, "I need respect and honesty, not control and insults." Her smile was chilling, thin and unreadable. "Fine," she said smoothly. "But remember, family comes first." As the planning went on, Rochelle's true colors emerged again. She demanded I cancel my honeymoon to babysit Lisa's kids, framing it as a family obligation. My heart clenched, the sting of being asked to sacrifice a long-awaited dream for their convenience. I hesitated, then found strength I didn't know I had. My husband and I planned this for years. I won't cancel. My voice was steady, but inside, it trembled. Rochelle's eyes narrowed, a flash of contempt passing over her face. The unspoken message was clear. This boundary was unacceptable. That moment broke something inside me. I realized, with bitter clarity, that no matter what I did, no matter how much I gave or tried, I would never be enough for her. I had done everything I could, laid down my dignity and hopes like a bridge, only to have them trampled. The cold rejection settled around me like a shroud. But despite it all, I held on to the quiet certainty that I deserved better. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. The walls seemed to close in tighter with every passing day. After I'd stood my ground about the honeymoon and refused to cancel, Rochelle's campaign escalated with brutal precision. I started receiving terse texts from Lisa. "You're making things worse. We don't want you here." Messages so cold they felt like shards slicing through any fragile hope I'd clung to. Mark, usually distant and indifferent, suddenly became a sharp-edged weapon in Rochelle's arsenal, echoing her accusations that I was selfish, divisive, and an outsider no one wanted to tolerate. Even distant relatives, once cordial, now avoided me at gatherings, their eyes flicking away when I entered the room. The isolation wrapped around me like a suffocating fog. The family I yearned for was retreating, folding up like a fortress that had no room for me. I sat alone in the quiet of our small apartment one evening, the silence pressing so heavily it felt almost physical. My phone buzzed again. Another curt message from Lisa, this one just 2 words, "Not welcome." I stared at the screen, the words echoing in my mind. Was I really the problem? Maybe they were right. Maybe my refusal, my attempts to set boundaries, only created more wounds. The self-doubt crept in like an unwelcome guest, whispering lies I hated to hear but couldn't ignore. Was I too sensitive? Too demanding? Had all my sacrifices been misinterpreted as arrogance or entitlement? The questions churned inside me, each one heavier than the last. Daniel's voice broke through the dark swirl of my thoughts. "You're not alone. I'm here." His presence was the only anchor I had left. He never faltered, never wavered in his support, even when the rest of the world turned their backs. I clung to that, the warmth of his hand in mine, the steady heartbeat beside me in the night. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for a family that rejected me so completely. Something inside me shifted quietly, a small, stubborn ember of resolve flickering beneath the weight of despair. I didn't yet know what it meant, but I sensed a breaking point approaching, a moment when I would have to stop giving and start protecting myself. The ache of loneliness settled deep into my bones, but beneath it, a slow-burning fire began to kindle. No longer just the invisible girl, the scapegoat. I felt something new stirring, a refusal to be erased, no matter the cost. The isolation was a crucible, and though it felt like defeat, it was also a strange kind of awakening. I was at my lowest, yes, but from this pit, something fierce and unyielding was about to rise. Then came the family Zoom meeting Rochelle orchestrated. A clear-the-air session, she called it. I should have known better than to expect anything but another sting wrapped in false smiles. As the screen flickered to life, faces I barely recognized stared back at me, cold and expectant. Rochelle wasted no time, her voice dripping with calculated venom, announcing that I would receive no inheritance and would be barred from staying in the family home after the wedding. She accused me of abandoning the family because I refused to babysit Lisa's kids, twisted my boundaries into betrayals, and painted me as the villain for putting myself first. The words were a slap to the face, but the silent nod from my father cut deeper than anything she said aloud. Lisa's eyes flickered with confusion and pain, but she said nothing. Mark looked smug, almost triumphant, and Rochelle's gaze burned into me like ice. The room felt suffocating, the faces around me blurring as my heart sank. The finality of it was unbearable. This wasn't just a spat or a misunderstanding, it was a severing, a public declaration that I was no longer part of this family's future. The veil lifted in that moment, and the truth came crashing down cold and sharp. They didn't just exclude me, they actively wanted me gone. The hope I'd clung to for years flickered and died, replaced by a chilling clarity. This was permanent. The weight of that realization crushed me briefly, but then a quiet, steady strength began to replace the shock. I felt a hand squeeze mine, Daniel's, steady and unwavering, and in that small gesture, I found an anchor. The breach was irreparable, the family's rejection complete. But as my identity as the neglected daughter dissolved, something new took shape. A version of me who would not be invisible anymore. The cold clarity that settled wasn't defeat. It was the birth of a new resolve. The game had changed, and so had I. Later that night, alone in the stillness of my bedroom, the memories came rushing back. Years of silent sacrifices, the money I poured into the household, the emotional labor carried without thanks. The weight of it all felt unbearable, and yet beneath the sorrow, anger began to rise. It wasn't a wild, destructive fury, but a sharp, focused fire that burned away the pain and left clarity behind. I thought of the broken vase incident, the constant dismissals, the whispered accusations. I saw the pattern with painful clarity, how I had ignored the signs, desperate to believe in a family that never truly wanted me. Grief transformed slowly, morphing into a fierce resolve. I remembered the family home deed, the mortgage payments made quietly in the background, this secret power I held, a weapon disguised as a safety net. For too long, I'd seen it as a fallback, something to protect me if all else failed. Now, it felt like the key to standing up, to pushing back with purpose and dignity. Never again, I whispered to the empty room, the vow steady and strong. Never again would I be invisible, taken for granted, or silenced. The anger was no longer raw, but refined, turning me from victim into strategist. The path forward was unclear, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The next morning, I sat across from Daniel, the weight of the night's awakening still fresh in my mind. I told him everything, the betrayal, the isolation, the breaking point. I confessed my decision. I was done trying to please a family that rejected me. It was time to protect myself, to wield my quiet power with intention and strategy. Daniel listened intently, his eyes full of concern, but also fierce support. "We need a plan," he said firmly. "This won't be easy. Rochelle won't back down without a fight." I nodded, grateful for his steadiness. We talked through possibilities, using the family home's ownership as leverage, cutting off financial support that currently flowed silently through me, and blocking the channels of manipulation Rochelle used so effectively. But I was clear, this wasn't about petty revenge or shouting matches. "I won't yell or fight," I said, voice steady. "I'll just stop playing their game." The idea of withdrawing my compliance, refusing to be their pawn, felt empowering. Together, we outlined immediate steps, gathering documentation of my contributions, preparing for any backlash, and maintaining a calm, strategic posture. I felt a shift within myself, from emotional turmoil to calculated action. The fear that had shadowed me was being replaced by control. I wasn't helpless anymore. I was preparing to reclaim my power on my terms. For the first time, I faced the future not with trembling hope, but with a clear, determined mind. The fight was far from over, but the balance of power was beginning to tilt. The first step was to map out every thread of dependency I had unknowingly woven through the family's fragile web. Sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of bills, bank statements, and receipts, I started listing out what I had been quietly supporting all these years. There were the monthly utility bills, gas, electricity, water, that I had always covered without complaint, even when Rochelle waved off my contributions like they were insignificant. Then, the car insurance payments for Lisa's 3 kids, something I'd taken over after Dad's health began to decline, assuming it was just part of being the responsible one. School fees, extracurricular costs, even the tutoring sessions for Mark when he was struggling to find his footing after losing his job. Each item was a thread I'd pulled taut to keep the family's fabric from unraveling, and I could see now how much I'd been carrying without acknowledgement. I wasn't just the financial backbone. I'd been the emotional safety net, too. I recalled the nights I stayed up listening to Mark's frustrated rants, offering quiet encouragement while Rochelle dismissed his struggles with a sharp tongue. I'd absorbed the tension, smoothed over conflicts, held the peace, always the silent healer. That alone summed up the invisible labor I'd provided, the unpaid work that no one saw, but which kept the whole household running. With this inventory, I made an appointment with a trusted family lawyer, someone Daniel had recommended after we'd started talking seriously about my rights. The lawyer was methodical, professional, exactly the kind of steady presence I needed. She walked me through the property documents, confirming the family home was solely in my name, a fact I'd only half understood before. It was a lifeline, a power I hadn't truly appreciated. We sifted through financial records, uncovering authorized accesses, joint accounts, and suspicious transactions. My hands trembled slightly as I pointed out text messages where Rochelle had demanded money, her tone veiling threats beneath polite requests. The lawyer advised me to document everything meticulously. Every conversation, every payment, every discrepancy mattered. That night, I compiled a dossier. Bank statements showing unauthorized access, receipts proving my contributions, screenshots of messages dripping with manipulation. Each piece was a testament to how deeply enmeshed I'd been, how much I'd sacrificed without recognition. Then came the shock. Discrepancies in my accounts suggesting Rochelle had been siphoning money for years. The sense of betrayal was a sharp, bitter sting. Yet, amid the hurt, a clarity emerged. They needed me more than I needed them. My role wasn't just taken for granted, it was exploited. That realization burned away the last of my doubts, replacing them with a fierce resolve. Still, I held back from acting immediately, aware that timing was everything. The dossier wasn't just proof, it was my shield and my sword. For now, it waited, a quiet threat beneath the surface. Quietly, I began locking down the fortress I'd built around myself. Each evening, I sat at my laptop, methodically changing passwords, revoking Rochelle's access to shared bank accounts, and tightening my digital defenses. There was something almost therapeutic about regaining control over the things she thought she owned. It felt like reclaiming my space in a world she'd tried to dominate. At the same time, I filed new legal documents with the help of my lawyer, ensuring my sole rights over the family home were undisputed. Every move was deliberate, but invisible to the casual observer. I kept Daniel fully informed, grateful for his unwavering support. "This is smart, Janet," he said, his voice low with respect. "You're not just protecting yourself, you're setting the stage." His calmness grounded me during moments when the weight of it all threatened to overwhelm. When I interacted with the rest of the family, I wore a practiced expression of normalcy. Rochelle's probing questions were met with vague but polite answers. Lisa's cold eyes didn't shake me anymore. I simply kept my distance. Mark's occasional nods of disdain bounced off like raindrops on steel. No one suspected the storm brewing beneath my composed surface. The tension was palpable but silent, like the moment before a thunderclap. I could feel the growing pressure inside me, a ticking bomb of contained rage and planning. I rehearsed conversations in my mind, calm, measured, unshakable. I told myself to wait for the perfect moment, to strike not with wild fury, but with calculated precision. The calm before the storm was a strange, steady kind of agony, an endless balance between restraint and readiness. Each quiet day added fuel to the fire burning beneath my skin, and I welcomed the silence, letting it sharpen my resolve. But then came the discovery that shattered any remaining illusions. As I finalized the dossier, I pored over my bank statements one last time, cross-referencing every withdrawal and transfer. That's when I noticed it. Unexplained withdrawals totaling $15,000 spanning 3 years, hidden in plain sight. My breath caught as I examined the dates, the amounts, the suspicious timing that coincided with family emergencies Rochelle had claimed required urgent funds. The worst part was the forged signatures, her handwriting anywhere near my name, a cruel mockery of trust. My hands shook as I showed Daniel the evidence, his face darkening with shock and anger. Together, we traced the transactions back to accounts Rochelle controlled under the guise of managing family crises. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. While I was sacrificing everything, time, money, emotional energy, Rochelle was stealing from me. This wasn't just favoritism or emotional neglect anymore. It was calculated financial exploitation. The realization reframed the entire conflict. Her cruelty wasn't just in words and actions, but sealed in stolen money, in broken trust. The weight of this truth settled heavily between us. I felt vindicated but also furious. How had I not seen it sooner? The theft justified every ounce of my pain and every decision I was about to make. The truth spread quietly among a small circle of trusted allies, Daniel, my lawyer, adding gravity to what I was building. I carried this secret like a loaded weapon, the hidden treachery beneath the already fractured family dynamics. Rochelle's mask was slipping, and with it, her power over me. The silence I'd maintained until now took on new meaning. It wasn't retreat or weakness anymore. It was the cold, controlled silence of someone gathering strength to topple a carefully maintained empire of lies. Every text she sent, every demand or manipulation, echoed against the walls of my growing resolve. This was no longer about hurt feelings. It was about justice. And I was ready to deliver it. The moment I stopped the flow of money, the cracks in the family's facade began to spread fast. I cut off the monthly payments I'd been quietly covering for utilities and car insurance, letting the bills pile up where they belonged. Rochelle's access to joint accounts was blocked, and I canceled policies I'd managed, like the insurance for Lisa's kids, without warning. The first overdue notices arrived swiftly, letters with bold red stamps, automated calls from service providers, and emails flagged as urgent. At family gatherings, whispers of missed payments and canceled services began to circulate, but no one dared to trace the chaos back to me. Rochelle was scrambling to contain the fallout, her calls and texts ignored, blocked on my phone and social media. Daniel stayed by my side, handling logistics I didn't want to face directly. "Keep your head clear," he urged quietly as I watched the storm from a distance. "They'll try to bait you, but don't give them anything." His calm steadied me, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this battle. Rochelle's frustration became palpable. I saw it in her eyes, sharp and wild with disbelief as she confronted the growing pile of unpaid bills and angry service providers at her side. Lisa's usual cold indifference shifted into anxious tension, and Mark's smug confidence faltered. The family's reliance on me, the one they treated like an outsider, was suddenly undeniable. The silence I maintained was no longer a sign of submission, but a calculated weapon. The cold method in my refusal to respond to their calls was a signal that control had shifted. Watching the family unravel from this quiet vantage, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and satisfaction. This was only the beginning, but already the foundations were shaking. My calm exterior hid the storm of emotions inside: relief, anger, and a fierce anticipation. They were learning, painfully and quickly, that I wasn't just a passive player in this family drama anymore. The game was changing, and I was holding all the cards. The day of the family meeting arrived with a strange stillness in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. I chose the living room for the gathering, the one where so many past arguments had simmered beneath forced smiles and polite silences. This time, everything would be different. Rochelle sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, her eyes darting toward me with a mix of suspicion and veiled contempt. Lisa and Mark flanked her, their expressions guarded but curious. Dad sat quietly in his armchair, looking tired but attentive. Daniel stood just behind me, a steady presence. I began calmly, careful to keep my voice even and controlled. Thank you all for coming. I wanted to talk about the family, about what's been happening beneath the surface. I took a deep breath and slid a thin folder across the coffee table, its weight heavier than it looked. I've been reviewing the finances and the ownership of our home. I have documents here, bank statements, legal papers, everything that proves the truth. I paused to meet Rochelle's gaze. Her lip twitched, a flicker of unease I relished. Slowly, I opened the folder and laid out copies of statements showing unauthorized withdrawals, transactions she'd tried to hide, the mortgage records proving the house was in my name alone. Rochelle, I said, my voice steady, I know you've been taking money without permission for years. I know you've controlled and manipulated this family by hiding the truth, but that ends today. The room was silent. Even Dad's usual rustling was gone. Rochelle's face paled, the stern mask cracking as she opened her mouth, but no words came. I pressed on. From now on, I'm setting clear boundaries. No more financial support from me into accounts I don't control. No communication unless it's respectful and honest, and you will repay the funds you stole. My eyes burned with a quiet fire. This family will no longer function on lies and control. Lisa shifted in her seat, her eyes flickering between me and Rochelle, silent but visibly conflicted. Mark's jaw tightened, and he avoided looking directly at me. Rochelle's shoulders slumped, her aura of dominance crumbling in the face of evidence. I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders, replaced by something fierce and freeing. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I was no longer the overlooked stepdaughter. I was the guardian of truth and justice. The family watched as Rochelle shrank beneath the weight of exposure, and I stood firm, composed, and dignified. The message was clear. Respect and honesty were non-negotiable, and the consequences for betrayal were real and final. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was relentless. Rochelle's world began to unravel quietly but inexorably. The unpaid bills she had been scrambling to cover piled up, forcing utilities to cut off services. I heard through whispered conversations how the house was plunged into darkness during critical moments, how phone lines went dead, and how desperate calls to service providers went unanswered. Legal inquiries and financial audits started to surface, questions probing the suspicious transactions I had revealed. Rochelle's frantic efforts to contain the damage only deepened her isolation. She called me late at night, pleading, apologizing, promising change. Every message was met with silence or a firm refusal. "I'm done," I told Daniel once, the words tasting like finality but also relief. Rochelle's desperate attempts to claw back control were futile. I was resolute. Mark began distancing himself, no longer willing to support his mother's narrative. Lisa's attitude shifted subtly. There were moments when she voiced tentative support for me, but always in hushed tones, as if afraid of causing ruptures. Rochelle's social standing within the family sharply declined, and it was painful, yet necessary to witness her losing the grip she had long held so tightly. I felt no gloating, only a profound sense of relief. Justice was unfolding naturally, and my boundaries were finally respected. Rochelle's desperation escalated as her control slipped away. She resorted to emotional blackmail, sending texts filled with guilt and threats of legal action. I watched carefully, documenting every interaction as Daniel advised, preparing for whatever she might throw at me next. She painted herself as the victim in their eyes, a cold-hearted daughter who had betrayed the family. but her manipulations backfired spectacularly. Some relatives, including Lisa, began to see through the facade. I received apologies, tentative but genuine, as they started to understand the truth I'd long tried to expose. I listened to their words but kept my distance, unwilling to reopen wounds prematurely. Rochelle's tactics grew more erratic, but her credibility was eroding fast. The family's power balance had solidified irrevocably. I was in control now, calm and resolute, while she clung to denial and isolation. Her final attempts to manipulate me failed miserably, leaving her exposed and alone. The chapter was closing and I stood at the center of it, not as a broken victim but as someone who had reclaimed her dignity and agency with quiet strength. 6 months later, I sat in my living room with Daniel, the morning sun casting a warm glow through the window. Our home was a sanctuary now, filled with peace rather than tension. The battles of the past felt distant, though the scars remained beneath the surface. I maintained minimal contact with the family, strictly on my terms. Rochelle remained estranged, facing the consequences of her actions, but no longer a presence in my daily life. Lisa and I had cautiously mended some bonds, respecting boundaries and moving forward with care. I reflected on the journey, not with bitterness, but with a calm acceptance. I didn't miss the chaos or the desperate need for approval. My family was the one who chose to be mine now, those who respected me for who I was, not for what I sacrificed. The freedom I felt was not born from forgiveness, but from self-respect and firm limits. It was a different kind of peace, the kind that comes from knowing you stood your ground when it mattered most. As Daniel reached for my hand, I smiled softly. "We've built something real here," I said, feeling a hope I hadn't dared to hold before. A life that's ours, free from the weight of false loyalty. The future stretched ahead, unburdened and open, a horizon bright with possibility. In that quiet moment, I knew I had won far more than a battle. I had reclaimed myself,